Thanks for being with us for this primary night coverage. Tonight, already the huge headline, Christine O'Donnell beating Mike Castle in the Republican Senate primary in Delaware. Mike Castle, the longtime Republican congressman, the establishment choice, seen as a relatively moderate Democrat, seen as having a very good chance against the Democrat in that race, Chris Coons, nevertheless defeated by Christine O'Donnell, the Tea Party-endorsed, very, very conservative candidate in Delaware. Right now, with 99% of precincts in, that's probably all we're going to get. 53 to 47, Christine O'Donnell over Mike Castle. Tonight, the field of candidates for this year's elections all over the country is getting that much clearer. The nominations are nearly all in. There's one more runoff in Louisiana. There's one more primary in Hawaii. But tonight's the last big night of primaries. After the ballots have been set, we will essentially have both the Democrats and the Republicans starting lineup that they'll be each sending to the plate in November. At the start of primary season, Republicans were given a not unreasonable but not sure thing chance of regaining a majority in either the House or, less likely, in the Senate. Where does that likelihood stand now? Well, joining us now is Nate Silver of the 538 blog, which now lives at the New York Times website. Nate, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Let me get your reaction, first of all, to the Christine O'Donnell win over Mike Castle in Delaware. Late polls looked like that was going to be the result, but she did come from behind.
Well, there was one poll that came out and had her about 3 points ahead, and they did a very good job, and it's hard to forecast these primaries. But if you had asked even a couple of weeks ago, people kind of thought, oh, just maybe it could happen after Alaska where Miller beat Murkowski. But Castle's been elected by Delaware, I don't know how many times, I think like 20 times or something, literally, as its representative, its governor, its lieutenant governor. I mean, he is not the incumbent in this race, but he's, someone who Delaware, you think, had a kind of perpetual relationship with. Republicans were thrilled when he decided to run for Senate. He's an old guy. I thought maybe I'll have one more kind of term left for 6 years. They were thrilled when Beau Biden did not run, but they've gone from this being an almost for sure win, not quite for sure, to a probable loss.
Well, can you quantify the electability difference between Mike Castle, the establishment guy, and Christine O'Donnell, who did win? Can you quantify it?
I mean, this is pretty. There's about a 20-point gap between them, right, where the Democrat Coons was 10 points behind Castle and 10 or 15 points ahead of O'Donnell. I mean, you don't see that clear-cut a case that often. That's why you had all these kind of, proper, like, kind of suit and tie conservative groups like the National Review or the Weekly Standard saying, hey, guys, let's think about this here. We want to take over the Senate, right? Castle's going to be with us some of the time, not all the time, and people kind of ignored the message and voted for O'Donnell anyway. I mean, I do think, I know the phrase is overused, but it's a little bit of a game changer. Maybe not enough to give the Democrats back the House, which they'll probably still lose. But in terms of the Senate, both in terms of the math, now there's one seat which looked for sure in the GOP column now is going to be lean or even likely Democrat, plus the fact that there's this whole other, kind of hand grenade thrown into the election and gives Democrats something to be excited about in a really perverse kind of way, I suppose. It's not a good night for establishment Republicans, certainly.
Right. In terms of the overall impact on the Republicans' likelihood of taking over the Senate, Is it I shouldn't say is it mathematic. Anything's mathematically possible in an election, but is it how much less likely is it that the Republicans will take the Senate if this seat in Delaware is now that much harder for them to get?
Well, we ran a piece on this a couple days ago, and it looks like, if LaMontagne also wins in New Hampshire, then they'll have about a 15% chance, whereas if both the kind of establishment candidates had won, they would have had about a 30% chance. So they about have their chance tonight of taking over the Senate. They still could.
Let's just restate that to be clear. So nationally, in terms of if you're just looking at the Republicans' chance of taking over the Senate, if Castle and Ayotte had won, they'd have about a 30% shot of taking over the Senate.
Now it's about 1 in 7, 1 in 8. They
if Ovid LaMontagne wins in New Hampshire.
If he wins, and I think he's ahead as of the last count.
I don't know. Do we have a current board right now in terms of the numbers in New Hampshire? It's just coming in. We've got 14% of precincts reporting Kelly Ayotte, again, for lack of a better phrase, essentially the establishment candidate for the New Hampshire Republican Senate nomination with 34% of the vote. Ovid LaMontagne with 48% of the vote. Again, this is a small number of precincts in, only 14% in, but Ovid LaMontagne seen as the outsider candidate there ahead. And Nate, to your point, if Ovid LaMontagne wins there, along with Christine O'Donnell, that puts the Republicans' chances overall at taking the Senate at about
15%, whereas it could have been 30%. And with LaMontagne, I mean, he's a guy who endorsed Mitt Romney. He's not quite in the O'Donnell category, but still, I looked like she was going to be a clear favorite against Paul Hodes, and so this is that's a minor risk in New Hampshire. Maybe you'll have some momentum behind him if he wins tonight, but in Delaware to basically throw away a Senate seat, really rare to see a party kind of walk into that trap. And I think the one thing we learned tonight is that no one is more unpopular, maybe even not Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, than establishment Republicans are right now. At least hardcore Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, most of them do, right? But hardcore Republicans don't like anyone with the establishment tag. And for someone like Mike Castle to lose, who've been elected so many times, it's pretty stunning, I think.
The other E word that's being overused, and rightfully so, besides establishment right now, is enthusiasm.
Sure.
Can we look at turnout figures today and extrapolate from those to anything important about November, or should we be cautious about that?
Well, I think there are abundant signs that the Republicans have a turnout advantage, and maybe a substantial one in the election. I think it might also manifest itself on a case-by-case basis, though, where one slight issue they have, and it's kind of a good problem to have because they have so much momentum, I suppose, nationally. But, you're going to have a lot of enthusiasm behind a candidate like O'Donnell among certain parts of the base, right? But she might not do quite as well with independents and moderates, right? Whereas someone like a Mark Kirk in Illinois, or a Rob Portman in Ohio, these, quote, well-adjusted kind of candidates, I suppose, more moderate, they might not get that kind of motivational gap from the conservatives as much and from the Tea Party. So maybe you kind of, wind up kind of splitting the loaf in a lot of places. And I don't know. I mean, I think Republicans are probably likely again to take the House, and the Senate probably went down. It's still possible, I suppose. But you might see a lot of idiosyncrasy from state to state, where they'll have some states where, like Scott Brown in Massachusetts, you're like, how'd that guy win? And you have them win a really blue state, against an incumbent and surprise someone. Whereas other cases where they seem to have everything going right, they might lose. I mean, candidates still do matter. You can tell in Nevada, for example, where Harry Reid was dead meat in that race. You don't get reelected in a Republican year when you're a Democrat majority leader with an approval rating of 38%, right? In that race, he still could lose. It's a toss-up, right? But the fact that he went from being 10 or 12 points down to being tied or a couple points ahead shows you that voters do have some threshold where they're like, I'm a little bit unsure, I want this person to represent me in the United States Senate.
The Sharon Angle factor, it matters. Nate Silver of the 538 blog, which is at the New York Times website now, and deservedly so. Nate, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Rachel.
Really help it. Remember health reform, that thing that dominated every night on this show for approximately an eon? Well, not every Democrat in Congress voted for it, and there are other Democrats who have not forgotten. Tonight, the left tries to punch back at the ballot box. Again, recapping what we know so far about tonight's primaries. In Delaware, the Republican Senate primary is the big news, with 99% of precincts reporting the Associated Press calling the race for Christine O'Donnell, the insurgent outsider candidate in that race over longtime Republican Congressman Mike Castle. O'Donnell coming in above Castle, 53 to 47% of the vote. We've also got a close watch on the New Hampshire Republican Senate primary. Right now, just 14% of precincts reporting, so take these numbers with a grain of salt, with that particular grain of salt. But right now, Ovid Lamontagne, the outsider candidate there, prevailing right now, 48 to 34% over Kelly Ayotte, who is the establishment candidate in that race, for lack of a better term. But again, only 14% of precincts reporting. We will be keeping an eye on that as our Decision 2010 coverage continues. Please stay with us.